Hello, Gary here, and welcome to Lost Treasure Stories. Okay, I've included some special pics in the beginning of this Lost Treasure video to give tribute to my Native American Cherokee tribal heritage. I've tried to paint a realistic account of the Cherokee tribal members. Everything was not sunshine and roses within the tribe. There were good guys and girls and bad guys and girls. There were friendly and not so friendly, kind-hearted people and hard-hearted people. There were members of the Cherokee tribe that were executed by other Cherokees because of treason against the tribe when the guilty parties sold Native American land to the white Americans. So in other words, Native American society closely resembled white European American society. But most of all, some of you will have the preconceived myths that you have been led to believe shattered. You'll notice in the pics that Cherokee dressed, talked, and lived the same lifestyle that the white Americans lived. Well, so much for the reputation of being savages, right? As usual, there's a special Lost Treasure Found story at the end of this video that you're not going to want to miss. It has everything. Murder or suicide, an old miser living in a falling down shack with his brother. They both sold shoestrings on the city streets to make money. But when the police went in to take one of them to the insane asylum, they found a house full of gold and silver coins. Poor guys. Okay, let's get on to this week's Lost Treasure Stories.
This is the lost treasure story of the Cherokee tribe's $2 million worth of hidden gold in northern Georgia. In 1838, the U.S. government started a hostile takeover of the Cherokee tribe's land in Georgia. U.S. troops were sent in and the Cherokee were forced at gunpoint to begin leaving. Of course, no plans were made to do this until gold was discovered on the land owned by the Cherokees. Most of the Cherokee tribe was brought under control and sent to what the government designated as Indian Territory in Oklahoma. It was an area that the government figured was worthless to the U.S. But the Red Bank Cherokee tribe of Georgia didn't play along with the plan. The tribe decided to stand up and fight for what was right. When the tribe started their resistance, they decided that it would be best to hide all the gold that they had mined in the area so the soldiers wouldn't steal it. The Indians had been using the gold to make jewelry, but when white settlers started moving into their land, the tribe found that they could use the gold to barter with the white man. The Red Bank tribe had been storing up their gold bullion and dust for years. Rising Fawn was a chief of the northern Cherokee tribes of Georgia. Rising Fawn had tried to convince all of the Cherokee tribal members to bring all their gold to one central location to hide it. But the Red Bank tribe didn't trust Rising Fawn or the white sub-chief named Scudder that was serving under Rising Fawn.
I don't think so.
They were afraid that Scudder would reveal the location of their gold to the soldiers. The tribe was smart enough to know that they couldn't fight a war with the soldiers and win, so they decided to bury all their gold to keep it out of the white man's hands. They would make plans to come back later to retrieve their gold. They put their gold in clay pots and buried it near the banks of Bruton and Bannister Creeks. It's been said that the Red Bank Indians buried well over $2 million worth of gold in today's value. But before they could retrieve all that gold, they were forced out of Georgia and were never able to return. In 1932, 3 boys were playing near Bannister Creek. The boys found a huge granite rock that had the key to the location of the Indian gold. The boys had heard all the stories about the Indians' lost treasure and figured the rock could be a marker. The boys knew Bannister Creek ran through the farm of F.R. Grover and decided to ask the farmer if they could dig for the gold on his land, but he refused to give the boys permission. The boys snuck back to the farm after dark anyway. The boys rolled the boulder to the side and started digging down. It didn't take them long before they dug up a clay pot. The pot was full of gold nuggets and jewelry that was said at the time to be worth over $15,000. But Farmer Grover found out about the boys' finding of the gold and filed a lawsuit. He won his suit and got the gold. But that one pot of gold was the only one that's ever to be known to be found. The remainder of the pots of gold are probably still buried on F.R. Grover's farm in Forsyth County, Georgia, right where the Red Bank tribe hid them.
Don't go away yet. Our next lost treasure story is coming up now.
The Doctor's Lost Treasure in Aurora, New York. In 1917, Dr. Albert Leffingwell told his son Thomas that he had hidden a quantity of coins on his property in Aurora, New York. But before he could show his son the hiding place, he died. His son spent years searching the property, but never found anything of what he was absolutely certain was buried there. He hired a man to help him search, but still nothing was found. Thomas Leffingwell died in 1974 without ever finding his father's lost treasure. 12 years later, two men that were remodeling part of the house found a secret room on the third floor of the 140-year-old structure. In the room was some old toys, 3 steamer trunks filled with historical items, an 1856 mason jar, and a wine decanter. Both the mason jar and wine decanter were filled with coins. The 200 coins found dated from 1803 to the 1860s and were said to be worth about $10,000. Relatives of Thomas Leffingwell said the coins that were found were probably not the main treasure, as Dr. Leffingwell had stated many times that he had hidden the main coin cache under a tree on the property. Dr. Leffingwell's lost treasure has never been reported found. This lost treasure story is from a newspaper article of April 11, 1899. Digging for buried treasure on the Matson farm near Hillsborough still continues. The cave found is said to be a perfect curiosity, the bottom of which is said to resemble the inside of a passenger coach. Traces of furniture and bedclothing are in evidence at a depth of 19.5 feet. Lately, Mrs. Matson has been alarmed by men digging in her farm near Hillsborough at night by lantern light. The sheriff arrested 4 men this morning, strangers, who claim to have a chart of the farm by which buried gold will be located. Since the Abbott affair, the reality of this one is looked upon with much interest. The men are from the city of Mexico and they refuse to disclose their identity. They claim that the gold was buried during the Civil War. Mrs. Matson has given her consent to dig for the buried treasure. Years later, there's still never been a report of the finding this treasure. This lost treasure story is from a newspaper article of February 12, 1885. Frank Metzger, an old-timer, dropped dead last week while at the breakfast table. He was a merchant and ranchman and was known to be very wealthy. No will was found, and the deceased was buried in a small cemetery built several years ago to receive his remains. Yesterday it was reported that most of his worldly effects consisted of $250,000 in gold, which he buried somewhere around his late residence. Great excitement prevails over the fact. Henry Corte, her son-in-law, dug down in Metzger's cellar, but did not find the gold supposed to be hiding there. Metzger lived in St. Louis prior to coming here. He was 56 years old and started his fortune in freighting across the plains in the early days. It is believed its gold will be found. A side note to the story, it never was reported that any of his lost treasure was found. This lost treasure story is from a newspaper article of October 22, 1916. Buried Catch Never Found is the title of the article, and it reads, "A story of great interest and duly authenticated is that of the 2 men who first discovered gold at Randolph. They were the first white men to come into this section, although others soon followed. After finding the rich gold deposits at Randolph, they had the mines to themselves for 2 or 3 years before the secret leaked out and the stampede started. In the meantime, these 2 men had carried away from $30,000 to $50,000 annually, had gone to a northern portion of Oregon, and had spent it during the winter months. Returning to their diggings in the spring, dead broke, they found a colony located there and realized they must make their last cleanup. They worked like beavers and accumulated, as they estimated, somewhere between $50,000 and $80,000. There was a rough crowd at the mines, and the partners slipped away in the night, desiring to leave the camp far behind before their absence was noted. They loaded their pack animals with a number of powder cans containing the gold held in amalgam and started north again over the trail leading into the South Inlet District. In the night they heard signs of pursuit and buried the greater portion of their gold beneath a large spruce stump. hurried away, and escaped to their old resort in northern Oregon, where their wealth was once again dissipated as before. 20 or 25 years had elapsed before one of them, a French-Canadian, formerly of the Hudson Bay Service, went to search out the catch. Off and on he spent 6 or 7 years searching, but he could never discover it. The cause of his activity became known to a few residents then living here, and several more men spent from 1 to 2 years in secretly hunting for the buried wealth. It has never been found, but someday will probably be turned up by some tie hacker looking for ship's knees in the district between the head of South Inlet and Randolph. A side note here, cutting timber to produce railroad ties was known as tie hacking. Ship's knees were brackets in the structure of a wooden ship. This treasure is still reportedly lost. This Lost Treasure Found story is from August 21, 1909. The title of this newspaper article is, Crazy Old Miser's Shack Stuffed with Gold. People laughed at old Peter Liebach and called him crazy. Peter begged for a living. Also, he sold shoestrings and herbs. His house was a shack on the shelf of a cliff, worth as much as a pile of driftwood. Peter lived there all alone except for his half-starved mongrel dog. Only his neighbors and his customers knew him, and they pitied him while they laughed at him. But when Peter Liebach's foolish actions grew menacing, when he came to curse the children and threaten them, the police thought it would only be charitable toward the old man, as well as more safe for the neighborhood, to remove him to an institution. But when they dragged the old man, kicking and cursing and fighting like a madman, down those stairs which few but he had ever used, they found gold. Gold in piles and stacks. Gold hidden between the walls. Gold heaped in old trunks and boxes. Gold everywhere, and much silver coin. The little shack, stripped of its treasure, was worth perhaps $5. As the shack stood when the police entered it, it was worth $50,000. Banknotes hidden away in crevices in the wall showed deposits of much more. Peter Liebach, who dressed like a tramp, was worth a conservative valuation of $100,000. 2 big express wagons groaned and creaked as they bore away the saffron treasure in 56 big bags to a bank deposit box. It took the clerks 2 days to count the money. The finding of old Peter's hoard is all a Pittsburgh sensation. Now that the discovery has been made, old inhabitants are recalling old stories about Peter. His father, Anton, before him, was a miser, they say. Peter and his brother Andrew followed his steps. There was a romance once in the brothers' lives. There were twin sisters, the daughters of a wealthy man in Millville, who the 2 brothers fell in love with. But though they came to court, they did not dress or act as ordinary suitors. Their arguments were chiefly mysterious ones of money. And the girls, being God-fearing, healthy, normal American girls who did not value money for its own sake, laughed their strange suitors to scorn. This closed the door to the Liebach's hearts. It was never again opened to the world. They retired to their little hut on the hillside forever. It was built like a fortress, in a way. No one could get in except by the long stairs which led to the level ground below. One of the brothers and the half-starved dog remained on guard all the time, while the other went out to beg, to gather herbs and mint, to sell around the city. They had a great old-fashioned shotgun, rusty and loaded with nails and slugs. It would doubtless have exploded if discharged, but it was a great comfort to the 2 brothers. One night 2 years ago when Peter came home, it was to find his brother Andrew stretched out on the floor, 2 gaping wounds in his side. He was dead, whether by suicide or from the attack of some unknown intruder, was never satisfactorily explained. Peter then went his way alone. He received no visitors. Even a priest from nearby St. Mary's could never get further than the door. When Sergeant Faulkner and 2 policemen made their search of the shack, it was like the realization of a wild dream. A table, so thickly covered with dust that its drawers were hidden, was bulging with coin. There were dollars, halves, quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies. In closets and pantries was money. Old clothes, just rags of cloth, were groaning with treasure, every pocket, the linings even, filled. Along pantry shelves was money, packed in cigar boxes, in pitchers and jars and saucers and tobacco boxes, tomato cans, wash boilers, salt sacks, tubs, everything that would hold money was filled. Libot will be sent to a private sanitarium. He was not known to have any relatives, but with the news of the finding of the fortune, many claimants have appeared.